there we go. If I go to that screen, I can. Okay, I'm going to restart my clock. All right. Man, it keeps bouncing back out of my slides. Why is it being weird? All right, anyway.
Let's give it one more minute and then we'll get started here. We got still the numbers are ticking up on our counter over here for our attendees, which is awesome. So really some outstanding names in there. Holy cow. We've got a Tom Ray. We've got our own law enforcement expert from Seattle, Tyler Verhar's on, which is fantastic. I see Mo
Oh,
down in Portland. Good to see you, Mo.
oh, and Andy, I heard Tyler might not be here for the whole time. Do we want to figure out where he
Oh
fits
yeah.
in now that he's here?
Yeah, yeah. Let me promote him, and then we can bring him in. So that'd be awesome. I think I invited. There we go. Hey Tyler, thanks for joining us, bud. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you guys. Yeah, sorry, the training's kicking off, but I was able to sneak out for a little bit.
Love it. Well, you're welcome to join in and comment as you will, and welcome to join for as long as you can. So we
Awesome.
appreciate
Thank you.
you. I'm going to get started. Welcome to our August webinar from the Resuscitation Academy. We are so excited to have three friends of mine. I don't get to say that very often as the speakers today. Really great people. We'll start with Dr. Foster, just to go in alphabetical order. Colleen is an emergency physician and an EMS physician in Longmont, Colorado. She's medical director for Louisville Fire. I had to learn how to say that correctly because I'm from the Midwest where it's Louisville and Louisville Fire in in the kind of between Denver and Boulder from my understanding of the geography there, and has been to several resuscitation academies with us, and really has done an awesome job with implementing some of the lessons that we've shared with her, and I think we'll share some really cool stuff today. Dr. Rusa, Jason Rusa is with us as well. Jason's another fantastic EMS physician from the state of Colorado. Did his fellowship in Arizona, working with probably Ben Bobrow was there when you were there.
Yeah, Ben and Dan
Yeah, working
Spate
with
were
Ben
my
and
fellowship
Dan Spate.
directors.
Oh, that's awesome. Those are great guys to learn from. And Jason's really taken a bend on sort of the intersection of EMS and law enforcement and where those things overact, and then really has grasped on to how cardiac arrest can be augmented with police involvement, and really exciting stuff. I think really some really cool footprints for how to do this in your own community that we're going to learn about today. And we're joined, I hope, for at least part of the time by Tyler Verhart. Tyler's our amazing Seattle EMS lead for the Seattle Police Department. And Tyler's an EMT and helped run our Seattle Law Enforcement Resuscitation Academy that we held last February. And we'll talk a little bit more about the next version of that that's going to be upcoming this February towards the end of the webinar. So I think Dr. Rusa is kicking things off. Jason, go ahead and take it
Yeah,
away, and I'll stop talking and listen to y'all experts teach us a bit. So
yeah,
take it from
yeah.
here.
Well, thanks, Andy. So yeah, uh, Tegan and Andy asked us to speak a little bit on some of the topics related to the Resuscitation Academy for Law Enforcement that we did in February, and some of the impact of that. And so we're going to have two presentations here. The one leads into the other. I want to talk about some of the big picture stuff related to this and a bit of the why. Not that I think you guys need to be convinced why, but helping to form out some of those arguments to try to overcome the barriers that might get thrown up in your way when you try to build out these systems or start working on that is more of the picture. And then also start the conversation on how we can build this stuff out, make it bigger, make it more involved. Um, just quick conflict of interest stuff. I have nothing related to C or CME like pharmaceuticals or medical devices, but full disclosure, I mean, I train law enforcement as a chunk of my living and work with companies that make gear and train that. So, I have a vested interest in this stuff, but I think that's not as much a conflict of interest as just motivation more than anything else. And what are our goals? So I think that, what is the case for better medical training for law enforcement, big picture? Discuss a little bit of Resuscitation Academy's contribution to improving that cardiac arrest care with, Dr. Foster is going to go over like really a case study of implementing medical training for a police department while interfacing with the EMS and fire system, and then again starting a conversation, the questions and answer at the end of how you could become more involved in police medical training and the goal to increase survival. So what's my background on the topic? And of course, you got to have my I love me slide. So I actually started more in law enforcement than I did in medical. I was part of Bay Area Mountain Rescue Unit out in California and was a unit leader for that with San Mateo County Sheriff's Office before I decided to change careers and go into medicine and study at CU and School of Medicine and did residency and fellowship down at Maricopa and Phoenix and did a EMS and resuscitation science fellowship with Ben Bobrow and Dan Spate and others down there, and worked with police during that time as well, the Mesa SWAT team and some other law enforcement projects down there. Moved to Colorado and was physician advisor for West Metro SWAT, which is out of Wheat Ridge and Lakewood Police Department. And I'm also the field medical director for U.S. Department of Energy Office of Transportation. So those are the security teams that move nuclear weapons and special nuclear material around the U.S. and sit on various boards and go to various conferences. But I'm a member of the CTEC Board of Advisors as well. Just kind of a little bit of background on kind of where I come into this. That emergency medicine, EMS is always, I think for me, it also involved working with the police department on and SWAT teams and various other law enforcement organizations on how to do better medicine to get better outcomes for folks so that more people can go home after bad things happen. So the first argument I think that we can bring up on this is, why is this an important topic? And, it's the Willie Sutton rule, and he's the famous bank robber who apparently, as I was, Wikipedia studying this quote, he never actually said it. But they asked him why he robbed banks, and he said, well, it's because that's where the money is. And so I think that's an important part of when you look at your system, which is one of the core tenets of, the Resuscitation Academy doctrine and dogma, is what is your system and what does it look like? Because all the systems are different. So in your system, which patients have the highest potential for reducing mortality? And I think really, not to be flippant about it, but the patients that are going to have the highest potential are the ones that end up dying before they go home. And so, who are those in our system? And I think we can break this out into four different groups. And there's a reason why we picked four, which we'll talk about in a bit, which is, first and foremost, out of hospital cardiac arrest, which is near and dear to this organization's heart, but also trauma and casualty care, opiate overdose, and then death in custody are the four kind of topics that come out. And when you look at those patients, who is the first person in uniform to show up and meet these people? And in a lot of our systems, that's going to be police. And also, giving a shout out to dispatch and your 911 call takers. They're kind of there right at the beginning as well. I'm not going to talk too much about the dispatch part of it, but I definitely wanted to make sure that was mentioned, especially because they're usually housed within your law enforcement function, your police department. At least they are in a bunch of our systems. So they're part of this problem as well. So if we were going to design a program to train police and again, specifically patrol, and we had four different topics and we're allowed to do quarterly training, what could we do? And so I think that, high performance CPR using the Resuscitation Academy framework and the kind of topics that were covered, in the general Resuscitation Academy workshops and then the specific, the law enforcement one that we started this year. I think building that out would be very useful. I think that you get to casualty care, including things like MCI triage, hemorrhage control, airway breathing, and patient movement are very high value topics for our law enforcement colleagues. Then we get into the overdose issue, which is a huge problem throughout the country, but also adding in some of these people need high performance CPR because they just maybe appear to be overdosed, but really they're in cardiac arrest or they're in cardiac arrest from their overdose. So those two topics play together. And then certainly in Colorado, we've had some real disasters around EMS law enforcement and the agitation, restraint, sedation, death in custody that has resulted in some legislative changes that make it a little bit harder for us to take care of these folks in a lot of ways. So certainly this is another group of patients that are a very important group, both in that, there is preventable death there, but also this is something that is a big risk for our EMS providers and our law enforcement officers, and when these cases don't go very well. So those were kind of the four topics that could fit into a quarterly training. And again, this isn't a novel thing. This isn't our idea. Tyler, as we've been talking to him about this after Resuscitation Academy, there are other organizations in law enforcement that are doing exactly this. There are other companies and training programs that are doing this kind of stuff. But this is, a reasonable framework of high impact patients that are relevant to the law enforcement community and that they would be interested in. So then again, I think looking at your system is important. And, what is the current training that you have in your system? So are they just mainly badge courses that people take because they have to and maybe don't take too terribly seriously and maybe aren't terribly effective? Maybe they are. Do your officers enjoy doing those trainings? Are they fun? If you're asking somebody to do something that they may perceive as not an essential part of their job, if it's not something fun, you've basically created another barrier to them really taking that up. Is the training tailored to your system, or is it just an off-the-shelf training that may or may not be relevant? Are you integrating your law enforcement officers with your EMS training and vice versa, bringing your EMS providers to the law enforcement training so that they're gonna train like they fight? And also, is the training realistic? And I think the realistic training is an important thing too. So this is some realistic training, which when you're working with special teams like SWAT teams, they usually have the budget and time and training time to do this. This is actually Dr. Foster doing a surgical airway on one of our SWAT team operators who's a role player, who will come up again, Officer Shaw. So he's playing a role player who was shot in the neck, has the moulage on, and they're basically in the middle of a large-scale full mission profile drill, doing medical training as part of that. But that is, something that I think we can easily do, and we have done. This is the same agency. This is Wheat Ridge Police doing an all-hands casualty care and hemorrhage control training, and making these scenarios realistic to things they might see. Not everything is an active shooter. This scenario is basically, traffic stop and got sideswiped and injured a civilian and an officer with requiring hemorrhage control, and basically using that as one of our trainings there. So this is relevant, it's realistic. Taking that to the cardiac arrest realm is important because you really want your cardiac arrest training to be very relevant and realistic so that people can do it as well as they possibly can, because we know the quality of CPR and the engagement of the people doing the CPR to do it well makes a difference, especially early on.
Wait a second, we got to go back to that picture of Colleen looking like a total baddie. I mean, that is amazing. With the headlamp too, like she is ready to kick some total butt. That's awesome.
Yeah, and the thing too is that the officers and the trainees who were part of this operation as part of the annual SWAT school, they remembered this training and it was really important, and that plays into the relationships that we build out. So, what relationships do you already have with your police department that are medical? Right now, NTOA requires that your SWAT team has a medical function to it and medical direction to it. So, do you have a physician who's already interfaced with that, or EMS providers who are already part of the SWAT team? The key thing there is they have credibility, they have the relationship, and they have the political capital to be able to say, "Hey, we should also be doing these things," and so that's something that's important. Also on the dispatch side, do you have a physician or other medical folks already interacting with your PSAP and your dispatch folks, which they should be for the telephonic CPR and those other programs, but that's usually housed, at least in our system, in a law enforcement environment as well. So our dispatch is part of the police department at Broomfield. And so again, that's another entry point where building on those relationships is important. And then, here's another big deal. Interest and enthusiasm really matters. And this comes down to you as an individual if you want to build out one of these programs, is that this stuff's really hard to do. And some of it's boring and tedious. And you really want to start with the things that are most exciting to you, because you're going to need that energy and that momentum in order to get things moving. And you're going to need to find an ally within the organization who's also interested in that. And what part of it are they interested in most? Because there might be the thing that you think is most important, but if the organization or your people within the organization aren't as motivated about that, it's going to get hard to get that program going. So maybe out of hospital cardiac arrest isn't the first thing that you start with when you start doing medical training with your police department, but you can build momentum from small wins and really meet them where they are. What are their perceived needs? What are the things they're afraid of? What are the things that they're worried about? What are things that have gone wrong in the past that they already feel motivated to do better at? What are they willing and able to do? What resources do they have that you can get started right away? And then again, another foundational part of the Resuscitation Academy materials is make sure that you're tracking your before and after data. If you can, get as much information as you can about that. And I think, the fact that you're on this webinar probably means you're a data nerd like we are, but most people aren't data nerds and they really learn more from and are motivated more from stories. And so we're going to go back to that officer who got his surgical airway in the training, Tyson Shaw, and we'll go to this happened right after we did another SWAT team training, which again was meeting them where they are. I got a phone call of like, hey doc, there's a big ammunition shortage. We don't have enough ammo for range day next week. Could you come by and do an hour or two of just classroom stuff on whatever medical stuff you want to talk about? And I'm like, sure. And what we talked about was we talked about the thing that police like to do. They like to scoop and run if they feel like EMS is delayed, especially if it's one of their colleagues, because they want to get that person to the trauma center, to the operating room as soon as possible. Well, what happened here is one of the patrol officers, it's at night, car went off the road. He went to stop and see what happened, and the driver, for various reasons, basically got out and just started stabbing him in the chest and face. Officer Shaw was the second officer to arrive on scene and got control of the scene and found his friend and colleague there, basically bleeding profusely from the face and neck. And what he said afterwards was, I wanted to throw him in the car and take him down to the trauma center. And with the amount of blood this guy had lost there and in transport, he would have just bled out before he got to the trauma center. But he said, hey, doc said what I need to do before I scoop and run is get the bleeding under control first. So he started working with direct pressure to get bleeding, got good control of it. By then, EMS had arrived. They got him to the trauma center. He had lots of surgery, but was discharged a couple days later with just some nerve injury in the face, but otherwise doing pretty well and survived this. Because of this, hey doc, you got a minute training that came in, and what that did was that actually gave opportunities for the police department itself to come up with the resources and the time to do the second training picture that I showed you before of this training. So that was the motivation to do an all hands training of hemorrhage control and casualty care because we had this success story. So again, finding those little stories, capturing those things, and then using them to do more and more good is a really, really important part of these programs. And then looking forward, this is a small, brief discussion of, this concept of training. Actually, we're going to be going down to Brisbane to the Australian Tactical Medical Association conference in October and doing a whole day workshop again on these four topics of what would a casualty care training program for patrol look like? What would a cardiac arrest program look like using much of the resources and framework from the Resuscitation Academy workshop in February, and then also talking about the death in custody issue, the sedation issue, and then the overdose and naloxone issue. So, if you guys want to go on a road trip down to Brisbane, we'll be down there, happy to see you. But definitely want to, hope this goes well, and this is kind of a nice part of that discussion and part of that ongoing project of building this stuff out. So that covers at least the first part of the goals for today. I'll open it up to Tyler if you have any comments on that. Again, like I said, you've been involved in this stuff for a long time and done a lot of this stuff firsthand with your police department. And so, if you have further details to add to that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, sorry for kind of the lack of preparedness on my part. We're actually at training today, so irony
Sweet.
at its best. Yeah, ultimately, what it really comes down to is this is a lesson that we learned a really long time ago with CPR. The earlier we can get hands on the chest, the more likely we are to increase survivability.
Yeah.
Now, we've had multiple lay provider CPR programs over the years where we've empowered people in key locations with this training to be able to intervene and reshape that slope of death so that these people can live longer, happier, healthier lives that fall victim to this. Well, that lesson extends so far beyond just out of hospital cardiac arrest. that lesson extends into our trauma system as well. The earlier we can get hands on the chest, the earlier we can get trained providers to those patients, the more likely we are to be able to stem the flow of hemorrhaging and provide a more viable patient throughout the continuum of care. And really, when you look at the system, you look at the ability for law enforcement to go into many locations and do that. You start looking into environments where traditional EMS is unable or delayed entry into those scenes as well. And you can start to formulate a plan where that key integral component of training law enforcement becomes there. One of the things that's happening around the nation right now, and is why this is a really key time to be talking about this, is there is a lot of initiatives going forward that are requiring law enforcement to not only train, but also provide medical aid to those that they come in contact with.
Hmm.
Back in the day, 18 years ago, when I became a police officer, we called it the ray of hope. That's where you stood over your patient with your flashlight and said, "Hey, man, don't go to the light. Medics are coming," right? My very first sergeant once told me, he goes, "Hey, kid, never drive faster than the ambulance to a medical call." Well, those days are gone. Those days have changed, right? And we've seen that. I've been teaching law enforcement medicine since roughly about 2011, all over the country. And we have seen that when you give officers the tools and you empower them to know that no matter what they do, they're helping, they're going to jump in and they're going to start saving those patients and they're going to make that difference. The key is giving them the opportunity to succeed in that and knowing that medicine's scary for law enforcement. They're not sure what that's going to happen when they go to touch that patient. Empower them to know as long as you stay within your left, right lateral limits, you're going to make a difference. And this is one of those things that really helps push law enforcement over that edge and gets them involved and makes them want to get involved. On the command side of things, Dr. Rosa talked about cost. These programs can be created from O2 tubing and nylons and hot glue all the way up to the full fidelity. What we found through Force Science Institute and through lessons that we've learned on human studies when they're engaged in stress is that we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our lowest level of consistent training. You have to train officers under that real life stress. You have to make it real for them. When it becomes real for them in training and it happens in the actual streets, they know very little the difference. They're able to recall what they've learned in training and apply it very quickly. These are lessons that we've learned in law enforcement through force on force training, through defensive tactics, through the gamut of everything that we do. It is all scenario based. So as you go to your law enforcement agency, they're already primed and understand the value of that. Now it's just bringing that medicine aspect to it and working together jointly between fire and EMS to bring them up to the point where they can do that. One of the biggest things that we've learned over the years is that in times of peace, modern medicine is catapulted forward by the civilian side. At times of war, trauma is catapulted forward, penetrating trauma, especially by military. Our law enforcement personnel are naturally drawn to that military style medicine, whether it's YouTube videos or whatever the case might be. They find it fascinating. Our job is to rein in that aspect and show them what the operational environment that meets your individual system is. Each system is very different. What works in Seattle isn't going to work in Florida, isn't going to work in Chicago. You have to tailor it to that specific system. And CPR, AED, and your basic hemorrhage control is the gateway into making that system even more effective. There are so many resources out there to assist with this, from the International Associations of Chiefs of Police, through CTEC, through the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care. My one thing that I ask for everybody involved is don't just watch it on YouTube and try and do it. Seek out those true medical professionals, or if you are that true medical professional, be that resource for those officers in your area so that they know what solid foundational medicine is, so that ultimately the goal of all programs are to keep names off the memorial wall, right? To save law enforcement so that they can go home at the end of their shift. And if you teach them that, they will save everybody that they come in contact with. That's all I have. Thank you.
Tyler, I want to just ask a quick question for you and Jason. And, I hear a lot about these sort of building relationships, right, between sort of EMS physicians and the law enforcement side. And I hear a couple things in what Jason talked about. I heard presence helps, and I think bringing that expertise helps. But I'm curious for both of you, kind of what have you seen be successful at building these relationships, whether it's between fire and EMS, medical and law enforcement, kind of these bridges that need to be built to have this effective training and effective relationships, frankly. Like, where do you see those growing from, and what benefits the most?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a little bit vulgar. It's show up and give a shit is that's the foundation it's all built on. And it's also, and what I mean by that too is showing up and caring about what it is that your guys and women out there want and need, like it's not, I mean, yes, you have to be motivated in this. It has to be something you're interested in. You have to have some passion in it. But just showing up and teaching stuff that's important to you doesn't get there. I think you have to figure out what is it that they need and want. And when you help them get that, then eventually they'll also allow you and be interested in what are the things that you think they need and want. But it has to be about them first. And it has to be, showing up and putting the energy in and being there when it's raining and cold and miserable on top of the nice training days and the air conditioned rooms, like just being around and caring about them. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. Law enforcement can be a tricky group of individuals to break into. Just like all first responders, we're no different. We become jaded, compassion fatigue, all of those kinds of things, right? But ultimately, your avenue in is through their own self-preservation. We
Mhm.
know that in society today, it is getting far more dangerous for law enforcement. My father stopped or retired after 43 years of being a police officer, never being in a lethal force encounter, never having to deal with that, to include 28 years on a SWAT team. My 18-year career, I've been in too many. And so the next generation of officers are there as well. So if you have that expertise, come to them and teach them how to save their life and save their partner's life.
Mhm.
Show that you're invested in their survivability, both mentally, physically, and legally. And then through that, you can build that relationship and expand that to the community. Every agency across this country in every state has that story of that officer that died of a heart attack, that officer that got stabbed, that officer that got shot, whether it was in their agency or one nearby. Find that story and use that to help empower those officers to learn this lesson and learn these skills. That's how law enforcement casualty care started, the program that we run. And what we found is while we never intended for it to be this widespread medical program, once we taught officers to save their lives and their partners' lives, they did it instinctually. And what you're really talking about is changing the culture. And when you're changing the culture, it takes time. Be in it for the long haul. Like Dr. Rosa said, be in it when it's raining, be in it when it's miserable, volunteer, come out and train. And you will be surprised once we know why you're there. Law enforcement is like your faithful dog. They'll never leave your side. Once you're in, you're in. And once you're in, you can start really making those changes and making those suggestions.
I think that's great advice. Speaking of Dr. Foster, I saw you with that amazing tactical gear on, your tactical headlamp, your knife in your hand, ready to do procedure, living on the border of law enforcement and EMS. I think you have some material for us, and I want to hear from your experience and expertise. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Dr. Rosa. So
I'm gonna need hemorrhage control after this because she's gonna stab me.
I have no plausible deniability, right? I can't be that predictable. Okay, so I'm going to share my slides with you guys. And Tegan asked me to talk with you about a case study, basically. So we implemented a CPR program for law enforcement. I'm an EMS medical director for Louisville Fire. That's who we're going to be talking about mostly today is our program with Louisville Police Department. I'm also a medical director for Mountain View Fire and an associate medical director for North Metro Fire, along with Dr. Rosa. So we are in Colorado. We're kind of in the Denver, Boulder part of the world, mostly suburban fire EMS systems. So that's where I work. And again, we're going to talk about the program that we implemented at Louisville, along with our our police department. And I'm really going to talk mostly about sort of the nuts and bolts. How did we get started? What sort of things have we accomplished so far? And then what do we have yet to continue to accomplish to really put a bow on our program here? So, let's see if I can get to the point where, you know what, let me stop sharing here and then share a different screen. All right, AV, here we go. Okay, let's try that. Are you guys seeing my slides okay now?
We see them in the power. There you go. That looks good.
Perfect. Okay. So the first thing, I guess, to echo what Dr. Rosa and Tyler were saying is that this didn't start for us with CPR. We had a relationship with our police department that existed prior to taking on the CPR project. And what we realize about our law enforcement colleagues, again, a lot of things we've already talked about, we're really expecting a lot from them. We're expecting a lot in terms of their primary job, which is to keep us safe and uphold the law. But we're expecting a lot from them in terms of emergency initial response as well. So this started for us with some training in some other medical topics. This started with a standing order for Narcan that I wrote for our police department. This started with a Leave Behind Narcan program with some training for opiate overdose, some training for patients that are suffering from opiate use disorder, and what kind of resources and tools can we equip our officers with to be better able to interact with those patients and provide them what they need. This started with hemorrhage control. Again, I don't know a law enforcement officer that doesn't have at least 2 tourniquets on their person at any given time. But how many people have talked to them about, hey, when your partner gets stabbed in the neck, I need you to sit there and hold pressure for 5 minutes until help arrives if we want him to go home at the end of the day. So those sort of lessons we covered in hemorrhage control training. And then again, being from the great state of Colorado, we've made the national news at least twice in the last 5 years for medical agitation and patients that are suffering from medical agitation, and just how frequently those interact with law enforcement in a way that's not great. So how do we equip our police officers with the ability to recognize medical agitation, to take care of those patients in a way that that is safe for them and safe for our officers, and allows the EMS providers to do their job, which is to take care of the medical emergency. At the end of the day, the law enforcement officers, like Tyler said, they are uncomfortable with the medical stuff. So how do we give them enough skills so that we can drive confidence? Because that confidence is what's going to promote action. And once they're able to be confident enough to take that first and second step, this is going to beget more and more action on their part. So we started there. And then we began our CPR journey at Louisville Fire. So we formed our cardiac arrest survival committee. We took that committee to Resuscitation Academy. We came back on fire to fix CPR in our district. So we did our HPCPR revision. We developed our CQI program. We started holding survivor celebrations. We started attempting conversations with our dispatch centers, which were maybe not quite as productive at that point in our journey. And then it wasn't sort of long after we'd taken those initial steps that we reflected back on our time in Seattle. And you guys will remember this slide as Resuscitation Academy alums from Dr. Kudenchuk. But it's those first few minutes, right? Your likelihood for survival goes down by 10% per minute after you have a cardiac arrest for every minute that goes by. And I'm sure your system is a lot like mine, but most of our arrests are unwitnessed, right? So we're not arriving there at minute 0. And the next slide, of course, you guys will remember this one too. How do we cut that rate of decline in half? So we cut that rate of decline in half by providing bystander CPR. And all of this to say, what we've realized is at the end of the day, our goal is to create neurologically intact survivors in our district. We want to return people to their jobs, to their communities, to their families. And this is a time game. So we need to look at those first precious few minutes that we have and say, how do we make this process better if at the end of the day, our goal is to create neurologically intact survivors? And that, made us think a little bit about Julie, Julie Buckingham, right? And her education towards our communication centers. How do we get our dispatchers to help us recognize cardiac arrest? How do we get them to prompt CPR? How do we get them to successfully get our bystanders to do CPR? And if we get our bystanders to successfully do CPR and we are lucky enough to have a patient that's in a shockable rhythm, we're still left with a gap between when someone is providing CPR and when they have access to defibrillation and then potentially return of circulation. So when you start thinking about your system even more broadly, you start kind of filling in the gaps. Again, those first precious few minutes. So what's in there? We've got our dispatch centers, we've got our bystanders, and this I am a vital link I'll explain a little bit later, but that's how we think about our bystanders in our community here at Louisville. We think about community AEDs. How accessible are they? How frequently are folks getting access to an AED before we arrive? And then we think about our law enforcement, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We think about our system, and then, of course, our hospital systems from there. But today we're concentrating on our law enforcement. And when we think about law enforcement, again, as Dr. Rosa mentioned, one of the things that makes this a key part of our chain of survival is the fact that they are there first. More than half of the time for us. If you look at national studies, somewhere between 40 and 60% if you're in a suburban environment like we are. And when they're there first, they're there on an average somewhere between 1 and 5 minutes before we are. And again, I don't need to explain to you guys how precious just those 5 minutes are if we're able to provide bystander CPR during that time to someone in cardiac arrest. And one thing you'll notice about this photo from the Louisville Police Department website is nighttime, right? And that law enforcement officer is in their car, as opposed to my fire EMS system, where if they're not on a call, they are not mobile. They are not waiting in their car for the next call. So law enforcement being mobile in smaller vehicles that are not meant for patient transport, again, sort of leads them to be an easy target to be there quicker than we're able to be there to respond to somebody who's truly having a medical emergency. So when you start thinking about your system, right, and you're looking at creating a project, this can get really overwhelming. This seems really big. It seems really hard. And I'll show you your one obligatory mountain photo for the presentation because we are from Colorado. But somebody told me once that if your project seems too big to get started, just make your first step smaller. So you need to sort of start on a path road to action, right? And that action will beget action. So just take your first step. And for us at Louisville, our first step with our law enforcement program was CPR training. So we took over CPR training for our police department. And when we took over CPR training, we learned some lessons. And so these are some of the things that we learned along the way. What we learned is while our SWAT operators tend to have a lot more time and budget for training, our patrol officers don't. And this is very different from the fire EMS system where we have dedicated time for training every month. We have educators, we have equipment that's expensive and realistic. So getting the time for this training was difficult. And how we started that in our system was we started at shift change. So the first year that we took this over, we implemented this training during shift change. The oncoming shift took the class, the offgoing shift covered the streets, and then the offgoing shift took the class after the oncoming shift was finished. And that's how we did it year one. After that, we had a change in our leadership in the police department and had some dedicated training days established for our patrol officers. And we were able to scrape some of that really, again, precious time of training for our patrol officers to train on CPR. And that's how we've been doing it since then. But, to find a time to train was more complicated than I think some of us in the EMS systems have with our agencies. Finding a contact within the police department was also a really important piece to get the training scheduled. And that contact person for us has to be someone that has some oversight over both the training calendar and the ability to schedule, basically. So, somebody who has both ability to look at training and to influence the calendar. So for us, that was our deputy chief for patrol initially, and has since moved on to someone in training. But finding that dedicated person was important. Otherwise, a lot of emails went unanswered initially. Additional lessons for us for implementing a CPR program. Our cops needed and wanted cards from the AHA. So as you look at your agency and you're looking at how you want to structure a CPR instruction program, that may influence who's able to be your point person. That may influence activities that you need to have folks do beforehand, before the training. We do hold a training every year. Again, we now have some of that really coveted time in their dedicated training days. Oh, when I asked my trainers, hey, what are some lessons that you guys learned when implementing these for our police officers? They said, you know what, we start with the stuff that we really want them to walk away with the most. Because when you start a training, everybody is kind of fresh in their attention span, and they said, hey, everybody's afraid of kids. And so what we did was we started with pediatrics. So we wanted to really emphasize some of those take-home points from Resuscitation Academy in terms of how we manage pediatric emergencies and how that can influence outcomes. The other thing that we learned is that your EMS agency really needs a point person that this is part of they're the pilot of. So this is going to require a bunch of emails back and forth, a bunch of scheduling coordination, a bunch of explanation, as well as somebody to show up and do the training. And so this really has to be someone's passion project. And we are fortunate enough to have individuals in our agency that take over this portion of our HPCPR at Louisville. Victories matter. So when you guys talked about buy-in and culture and how you make this important, turning victories into momentum, right? So survivor celebrations really matter. And we started holding survivor celebrations after we returned from Resuscitation Academy. This photo is from one earlier this month. And the young man in the middle is the cardiac arrest survivor. He is an employee at one of our inpatient psychiatric facilities and had a out-of-hospital cardiac arrest while at work that was witnessed by his colleagues. In this photo, to his right, your left, is the dispatcher who took the call, and then law enforcement, obviously from Louisville, who responded, and then my division chief of EMS, Sean Stark, there at the end. But including the police officers in these survivor celebrations is so important. These are so important for your responders, for your law enforcement agents, for your dispatchers, and for your survivors. I really just can't overemphasize. At the end of the day, this is why we're doing this. So this young man can return to his job, his family, and his community. Those of us who work in the ER know that sometimes you can do everything right and people still don't survive. And so I think that not only are survivor celebrations important, but just recognizing really hard work and a job well done is really important. So there's lots of kudos. I send kudos when I get notes from my EMS agency that, the law enforcement officer was there when we arrived. They were doing really great compressions. They wanted to stay in the mix of things as we were continuing to resuscitate. I send a lot of kudos to our dispatchers after I listen to dispatch tapes, even if things don't go well, because at the end of the day, this is what's going to help create your community and that buy-in that we talked about earlier. So including our dispatchers, we also include our bystanders. So one of the things that we've done is starting to get contact information from bystanders who do bystander CPR at Louisville. That I am a vital link slogan, we created a t-shirt that says that. I'm a vital link, has our fire department logo on the back, and we give those to our bystanders who do CPR, along with a letter that just says, hey, thanks for doing the right hard thing. Because again, in Colorado, we're not crushing it in terms of bystander CPR. So these are really impactful situations where we can say, thank you for doing that. And there's never a better opportunity to just say, oh, by the way, we give CPR classes. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. We want everybody to be trained in CPR. So we went to Resuscitation Academy for law enforcement. Tegan sent out the email, and I think it took us about 35 seconds to say, hey, Tegan will be there. And we went to Resuscitation Academy for law enforcement with one of our corporals from Louisville Fire. This is Adrian Severson there with me doing CPR. And we I came with a list of things I thought I would want as projects, and I came away with a different list. And some of the lists of the things that we talked about, got some ideas, of course, AEDs. And then some of the things that maybe I really didn't think about quite as much, but ended up being really important are identifying a member of the team on the PD side. Because as much as I think I can develop a CPR program, as much as I think I can teach law enforcement officers, I really just can't predict when and where the aha moment is going to be for them. And having that member of our team be able to troubleshoot some of the things that I couldn't even anticipate has been really, really helpful. And then, of course, we got that precious time to make a project, right? So all of us are busy. All of us have a couple of jobs, wear a couple of hats. And it's easy to think about things that you want to do and then come home to your reality, and then trying to make space to do that is hard. So having the time to sit down and make a list and prioritize that and talk about when we're gonna talk about it again is just really an impactful thing in moving our progress forward. So one of the things we did when we came home was we incorporated our police officers into our quarterly high performance CPR training that we do at Louisville Fire, and created a scenario where there was an unconscious party in a car. The law enforcement officers had to remove that person from the vehicle and recognize cardiac arrest, initiate resuscitation. And this gave us some opportunity, kind of real time, again, that realistic training to talk about some things that occurred. So what we realized is that our law enforcement officers are still uncomfortable with their AEDs, that the concept that someone who's in a shockable rhythm needs to be defibrillated or else they won't get ROSC, and you could do CPR until the cows come home, but they're still not going to wake up. That was a moment where it gave us that opportunity to talk about those things with them. We realized that not all of them carry trauma shears, so it allowed us to create an easy solution by putting a pair in the AED case. And then we talked through some conflicts that they were feeling in terms of being dispatched to an unconscious party and having their primary responsibility as a police officer to ensure scene safety. So how am I supposed to carry in all this medical stuff, have my hands full, be thinking about cardiac resuscitation when my job is to make sure that everybody goes home at the end of the day? So it gave us the opportunity to have some of these conversations with our police officers. When Tegan reached out and asked if I would talk about law enforcement CPR programs, my initial instinct was, oh my gosh, Tegan, I'm not done. My checklist is still not all checked off. And that was kind of a hard thing for me with just my personality. But I realize that a lot of you may be in the same place, or may be feeling some intimidation to get started because it feels like this is a project that you can't finish. So in the effort to help support you all, this is what I have left to do. So we came home from Law Enforcement Resuscitation Academy and realized that we actually have plenty of AEDs to get one in pretty much every patrol car that is out on the streets of Louisville, pretty much every regular day of the week. What we don't have is a checkout process to make sure that those go into the patrol cars and then come back and then go back into a patrol car. And I'm still working on that. I'm working on a plan for pulling data from the AEDs when they're used. And another idea came up about the creation of a medical bag. And we're not talking about a big backpack like what we use in EMS, but perhaps something that just holds their AED, their either bag valve mask or pocket mask, and some Narcan. So if they're called to an unconscious party or cardiac arrest, that this is an easier thing for them to grab and have all of the things they need in one place. So that is really what I have, you guys. Our relationship with our police department didn't start with CPR. It started with, again, wanting to help create some confidence around some of these medical issues that we expect our law enforcement officers to be able to respond to for our community. And it really doesn't end with CPR either. Again, our relationship with our police department is really strong, and we are very fortunate that we had a good relationship with them prior to starting the CPR project, and we continue to look forward to working with them in the future. This is not a program that I am doing on my own. This is a program that I'm doing in conjunction with my EMS agency at Louisville. And I can't overemphasize how much I owe it to them for all their hard work and dedication. So we were just recognized as a compass within the Lighthouse community, and first one in the mountain region. And can't tell you how proud I am and how much I couldn't do it without the dedication of everybody at Louisville Fire. So again, this is not me, this is them. And I'm honored to be a part of it. So that's where we are and how we created our program. And I am happy to take any questions that you guys have.
That was awesome, Colleen. Thank you so much. We really are excited to welcome you all into the Lighthouse program, and really, I think both you and Jason have shown, what your area has to offer today, and really tremendous work on this project and many other projects that I know are cooking in the background for Louisville and for the area. So super cool. One question that came through the chat, and I know Tyler has some experience with this, and I'm sure you all as well. Police have the body cameras, and that footage exists and is often public record, even in sort of these more medical type situations. Have you guys used that for case review, for quality improvement type efforts? What does that kind of work look like, and what do you think of those activities?
On our side, that is definitely an opportunity that we haven't yet started with. But it's actually at the point too where there are some discussion amongst EMS leadership about, the body cameras have done so much good for the police in capturing what's happening in real time from multiple points of view of, is this something that we need on the ambulances? Is this something that we need body cameras on the medics? And so I bet before all of us are done with our careers, we'll probably see them there. I feel bad for the first medical director who makes it happen because he's probably going to get strung up for it because nobody no everyone is very sensitive to that, and I think that's been one of the barriers also that we don't regularly pull that because I think that the feeling of it, if we started doing it right away or doing it for particular cases, would be it would be a feeling of being picked on and looked at because the people on the EMS side are not as comfortable with the benefits of it, I think, as our colleagues on the law enforcement side. So it is in the future, but it is in the indeterminate future for us.
Yeah, I'd say if, looking at body cam footage, with great power comes great responsibility, right? 4K HD TV shows everything in the cold light of day. So do your QA, QI as you start this process and find those success stories and use the body cam footage as the icing on top to highlight those successes, to show the video of what it takes to save a life. Don't just jump into it for using it for improvement alone, because that's how you're going to lose people very quickly. Learn the lessons from law enforcement, right? When we adopted body cameras, it wasn't to see the success, it was more of a punitive action. I think that would be the same across the entire US. As this goes into fire EMS, or the use of those videos goes into fire EMS, use it at first to highlight the successes and then slowly begin to implement it to use to for quality improvement, and make sure it stays there. Make sure it stays on that improvement side and doesn't become punitive. And I think it is a very, very powerful tool because we have seen training is only as good as it actually works in the streets. And if you can't validate your training through real life applications, the training doesn't matter, right? So this gives us the opportunity to validate it, ensure what we're doing has worked. And we've had multiple course corrections through our history at Seattle PD and beyond because of what we've seen on body cam and realized this isn't working. We need to change and do something differently.
All right, I got one more question that's come in the chat from one Dr. Tom Ray. You might have heard of him before. It's actually a really good question. It's one that we've lived through in multiple different iterations here in our area, and comes up time and time again. And that's, how does dispatch work, sort of integrating the EMS and police responses to cardiac arrest, right? Is this, one where just the police dispatch holds on because they're the PSAPs, or how have you guys negotiated that in your various areas, and what successes have you been able to uncover and find for patients?
I think Colleen has worked probably more with dispatch than the rest of us, so she'd probably be the expert on that one.
Yeah, and to be fair, I haven't done any real specific process change with regards to how our dispatch is handling cardiac arrest with law enforcement. Our police officers are dispatched to cardiac arrests, to unconscious party, and they are automatically dispatched. In terms of like times or projects, I can't say I've taken on any particular project in that area. Was there something specifically that you were thinking of, Dr. Ray,
No,
that
it's just sort of a challenge that comes up repeatedly. I know, we've got different solutions here within King County, right? The county outside of the city of Seattle is dispatches both police and fire, and so it's kind of a natural partnership there in the city. They're different PSAPs, right? And for a long time, there was a police was the PSAP that sort of answered and dispatched police and would hand off to fire EMS for those problems. Now there's a sort of third entity that dispatches police, which is a whole other level of challenge. Integrating another agency in, and the solution there has been for those dispatchers to sort of hold on to the call if they think it sounds cardiac arrest-ish, and then add the police as co-responders, listening in the background to what the fire sort of assessment of the call is as they go through. So some really interesting solutions have come out of this, right? To get care delivered to the patients or the citizens early, right? And I think
Yeah,
each one of these is individual, right?
it is very much so. And I think that in my region specifically, and I think Boulder County as well, which is where Louisville is, we've been very fortunate because they're the same dispatch center, so the call doesn't get handed off, and so they're dispatching both fire slash EMS and law enforcement. And again, the default has been since we came on board, that police are dispatched to these things. But I know that there are systems where dispatching police to these things is now an additional, the only thing people hate more than change is how things are, right? So as soon as you add something else in, it's a perception of you're asking me to do more work. So that's not a barrier that we had, but I have heard of a lot of places where that is of, well, my police aren't dispatched to these things, so they aren't there first, which gets into what we talked about, of knowing what is your system and where are the wins. And probably the first win isn't going to be you showing up on day one and giving people more work to do. That generally makes you fewer friends than more. So yeah, the thing that we've run into the most, and it's a recurrent problem, is a feeling that um, the dispatch cards that the dispatchers use are sacrosanct, and trying to modify those for things like starting compressions early, just doing compression, hands only CPR. Those are things that getting buy-in and credibility enough to say, no, it's okay. If you think this person's in cardiac arrest, start compressions. That's a good idea. And how to get that to fit into the systems they're comfortable with has been a problem, which has not been a problem for other systems. So again, each system's going to have different barriers that will not exist in others. And so it's, yeah, long answer to a short question, I guess.
No, I think that's
I,
great. I think
I
that's
think,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, I think Dr. Ray kind of eloquently outlined the future of, if I could be so bold, HPCPR, right?
Hmm.
The dispatch aspect, the early notification aspect is really going to drive survivability,
Hmm.
that next big bump. The lessons we've learned through Dr. Kudenchuk and all the greats that came before are now well implemented. And I think this is going to be, if I could, use a fortune telling device, be that next big uptake,
Hmm.
is how do we identify this sooner? And I know across the world, there's some really amazing programs going on right now that are attempting to do just that. And I think every system is going to be a little bit different, but how do we get somebody there quicker?
Hmm.
And I think that's where the challenge we all have in front of us. Every well-performing system right now is still got room to improve there. And I think that's where that next step comes, is how do we get somebody there quicker? And engaging law enforcement is just a small portion of that.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up there as we hit the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Jason, Colleen, Tyler. Really fantastic seeing you all. If this conversation has lit a fire for anybody out there, the next Law Enforcement Resuscitation Academy in Seattle is going to be February 9th and 10th, 2026, which sounds a long ways away, but man, it's coming quick. You'll get to see more of Tyler. I'll be there hanging out. And we'll have lots of conversations along these topics and some additional ones. It's going to be a really fun time. I think last year's session was amazing and was really, really valuable, and helped a lot of systems around the country. So we're excited to host it again and continue to grow and develop this program. Our next Resuscitation Academy webinar will be September 18th at 1 p.m. Pacific. We're very excited. It should be another great session. And some of you might notice we're missing Ann Dahl today. All of us are thinking of Ann and keeping her in our thoughts with the recent passing of her husband. So just really keeping a lot of positive vibes headed Anne's way. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and we will see you all next month, September 18th, back here on the webinar.